Please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. "You let me drown," the voice said from behind Jennifer Nakamura, a child's voice, wet and hollow, speaking words that turned her blood to ice because she recognized it immediately. Recognized it despite 3 years of therapy, despite medication, despite moving to Washington specifically to escape the memories of that Montana lake, where 8-year-old Sophie Chen had gone under while Jennifer was supposed to be watching the swimming area. Jennifer spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the radio on her belt, but the Hall of Moss's trail stretched empty in both directions. Nothing but ancient Sitka spruce draped in moss so thick it looked like green waterfalls frozen in time. And the voice came again. Closer now, directly behind her left ear. "You let me drown, and now he's drowning too." Jennifer's breath came in short gasps, the sound too loud in the oppressive silence of the Hoh rainforest. Olympic National Park in October was always quiet, most tourists gone, the trails empty except for serious hikers. But this silence was wrong, absolute, as if every bird and insect had fled. The air felt heavy, saturated, water vapor so thick she could taste it. Her ranger uniform clung to her skin, soaked through from the constant mist that gave this place its reputation as the wettest location in the continental United States. Receiving over 12 feet of rain annually, she was here because of Tyler Dawson's message. It had come through at 6:47 a.m., a voicemail left on the ranger station's emergency line, and Jennifer had listened to it 4 times before hiking out alone, against protocol, because something in Tyler's voice had triggered every instinct she'd developed during 5 years of backcountry work. The message had lasted 18 seconds. "This is Tyler Dawson, permit number 2847. I'm on the Hall of Moss's trail and something's wrong. There's water everywhere, but it's not raining, and I keep seeing..." Static. Then Tyler's voice again, higher, strained. "Oh God, she's wet. Why is she so wet?" Then silence. Then a sound like water rushing. Then the call dropped. Jennifer had tried calling back. No answer. She checked Tyler's permit. He was a landscape photographer from Seattle, experienced, well-equipped, camping legally at the Hoh River campground. His emergency contact was his sister in Tacoma. He'd been in the park for 3 days, shooting the autumn colors, and his permit was valid for another 4. The Hall of Moss's trail was a gentle loop, only 0.8 miles, elevation gain minimal, popular with families. Nothing dangerous, nothing that should have made Tyler Dawson sound terrified, but Jennifer knew terror when she heard it, knew the specific pitch of a voice confronting something the mind refused to process, because she'd made that sound herself 3 years ago, when she'd realized Sophie Chen had been underwater for 90 seconds. When she'd dove and found the girl tangled in submerged branches, when she'd pulled her up and tried CPR and failed while Sophie's mother screamed. Jennifer had been a lifeguard that summer working at Lake Mary Ronan, and Sophie's death had destroyed her. The investigation cleared her of negligence. Sophie had swum past the designated area, had ignored warnings, but guilt didn't care about official findings. Jennifer had quit, moved states, taken a job where she could help people, could prevent tragedies, could maybe balance the cosmic ledger. Except now she was hearing Sophie's voice in the rainforest and Tyler Dawson was missing. And the moss-draped trees seemed to lean inward, closing around her like a tunnel. Jennifer forced herself to breathe slowly, deliberately. Auditory hallucinations were a symptom of PTSD. She'd experienced them before, especially under stress. This was her mind playing tricks. Nothing supernatural, nothing real. She pulled out her phone, iPhone 5, new that year, one of the first smartphones with decent cameras, and documented her position. The GPS showed her coordinates, 47.86007 degree N, 123.9356 degree W, elevation 578 feet. The time was 9:23 a.m. October 17, 2012. She continued up the trail looking for signs of Tyler. The moss here grew impossibly thick, on tree trunks, on fallen logs, on the trail itself. Everything was green, layered green, cathedral green, the kind of green that existed nowhere else on Earth. The Sitka spruce rose 200 feet overhead, their trunks 6 feet in diameter, giants that had been growing since before Columbus reached America. Between them, vine maples blazed red and gold, autumn colors that should have been beautiful but instead felt ominous like warning lights. Jennifer found Tyler's tripod first, 20 yards off trail, set up facing a massive nurse log, a fallen ancient tree hosting dozens of younger trees growing from its decay. The tripod was extended, positioned perfectly for a long exposure shot, but the camera was missing. Tyler's backpack leaned against a nearby tree, opened, contents spilling out. His water bottles, his food, his sleeping bag, all there. His wallet was there, his car keys were there, his phone was there, and it was soaking wet. Jennifer picked up the phone carefully, water dripping from it. The screen was cracked, the device clearly dead, but it hadn't been raining. The forest was misty, yes, but not wet enough to soak a phone this thoroughly. The moisture was wrong, too much, too sudden, as if the phone had been submerged. She documented the scene with photos, noting that Tyler's gear showed no signs of struggle. He'd set up his shot, removed his camera from the tripod, and then... what? Walked away without his phone, his wallet, his supplies? A sound reached her from deeper in the forest. Dripping water, steady and rhythmic. Jennifer turned toward it, her hand moving to her pepper spray. The dripping grew louder, impossible to ignore, and underneath it she heard something else. Breathing, ragged and wet, like someone with water in their lungs trying to draw air. "Tyler Dawson," Jennifer called out. "Ranger Nakamura, Olympic National Park. If you can hear me, respond." The breathing stopped. The dripping continued. And then, from the direction of the sound, a figure appeared between the trees. It was a woman. She wore a white dress that hung heavy with water, dripping constantly, leaving a trail of moisture on the moss. Her hair was black, long enough to reach her waist, and it too dripped steadily, streams of water running down her back. Her skin was pale, gray-tinged, the color of something that had been underwater too long. She stood perfectly still, 50 feet away, and her eyes were wrong, too large, too dark, reflecting nothing. Jennifer's training said to approach, to check if this was an injured hiker, but every instinct she possessed screamed to run. The woman in white didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Water pooled at her feet, spreading across the moss. "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" Jennifer's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. The woman tilted her head, the movement too sharp, too fast. Her mouth opened and water poured out. A torrent that shouldn't have been possible, gallons of it spilling onto the forest floor. When she spoke, her voice was Sophie Chen's voice, 8 years old, dead for 3 years. "You let me drown, Jenny. You looked away and I drowned. Now you'll watch him drown too. You'll watch everyone drown." Jennifer staggered backward, her radio falling from her belt. This wasn't real. This was trauma, PTSD, a hallucination brought on by stress and Tyler's disappearance. She closed her eyes, counted to 10, employed the grounding techniques her therapist had taught her. When she opened her eyes, the woman would be gone, revealed as a trick of light and shadow and guilt. She opened her eyes. The woman was closer, 30 feet away now, though Jennifer hadn't seen her move. More water poured from her mouth, from her eyes, from her hair. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees, Jennifer's breath misting in air that had been warm moments ago. "Not real," Jennifer whispered. "You're not real." The woman smiled, and her teeth were gray, coated in algae. "I'm real. I'm Yurei. I'm Onryo. I died with hatred in my heart, and hatred keeps me here. You know this, Jennifer Nakamura. Your grandmother told you the stories. You just refused to believe." Jennifer's grandmother had told her stories. Obasan's tales of Japanese ghosts, of women who died violently and returned seeking vengeance. Yurei in white burial kimonos, long black hair, seeking those who wronged them. Jennifer had dismissed them as folklore, as cultural mythology, nothing more. But her grandmother had been specific about the signs: the cold, the water, the presence of wetness where no moisture should be. Uri were associated with water, with drowning, with floods. They appeared soaking wet, dripping endlessly, carrying the water that killed them. The woman, the Uri, moved forward, and this time Jennifer saw the movement, saw how she glided rather than walked, her feet not quite touching the ground. Behind her, more figures appeared between the trees. A man in hiking clothes, water streaming from his mouth and nose. A woman in a park ranger uniform from the 1980s, her face bloated, her eyes clouded. A child no more than 5, water dripping from outstretched fingers. All of them dripping, all of them watching Jennifer with hatred. The rainforest remembers, Sophie's voice said from the first Uri's mouth. The river remembers. All the ones who drowned, all the ones lost to water, we remember. Olympic National Park has taken 37 lives to water since 1938. Drownings in the Ho River, in Shusher Beach's riptides, in Lake Crescent's cold depths. We are all here. We are all angry, and he tried to photograph us. Understanding crashed over Jennifer like a wave. Tyler Dawson had seen them. He'd come to the rainforest to photograph the moss, the trees, the autumn colors, and he'd seen the Uri. He'd tried to document them, and they'd taken him. Where is he? Jennifer demanded, fear transforming into ranger professionalism. Where is Tyler Dawson? The Uri moved closer, 15 feet away now, and Jennifer could smell her. Stagnant water, decay, the particular rot of drowning. He's where all who see us go. He's in the water, always in the water, drowning forever, never dying completely, trapped in the moment between life and death. Jennifer's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw a text message from an unknown number. The message was a photo. Tyler Dawson submerged in water, eyes open wide in terror, hands reaching upward toward a surface he couldn't reach. The metadata showed the photo was taken 3 minutes ago, at these exact coordinates. But there was no water here. The nearest river was half a mile away. Jennifer looked up from her phone, and the Uri were closer, surrounding her in a tightening circle. The moss beneath her feet was sodden, water squelching with each step. The air itself felt liquid, hard to breathe, as if she was already underwater. You let one drown, the Sophie-voiced Uri said. You must save this one, or join us. Those are the rules. Save him before the water takes him completely, or drown yourself in guilt and grief until you become like us. Onryo, bound to this place, seeking vengeance forever. The Uri vanished, all of them simultaneously, dissolving into mist. The temperature rose, the oppressive wetness receded, and Jennifer stood alone on the trail, her heart hammering, her phone showing the photo of Tyler drowning in water that shouldn't exist. She had a choice. She could leave, get help, follow protocol, or she could find Tyler now while he might still be alive while the Uri's challenge remained open. Jennifer thought of Sophie Chen, of the 90 seconds that had killed her, of how Jennifer had failed to save her. She thought of 3 years of therapy, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of waking up drowning in phantom water. She couldn't fail again. Jennifer moved off trail, following the direction the Uri had indicated, pushing through ferns and moss toward the sound of running water. The forest grew darker, denser, the ancient trees blocking what little sunlight filtered through the constant cloud cover. Her boots sank into moss that was wetter than it should be, water pooling in her footprints. She found the river after 10 minutes of bushwhacking, a tributary of the Ho River, narrow but deep, moving fast with glacial melt. The water was gray-green, opaque, impossible to see into. And standing at the river's edge was Tyler Dawson. He was soaked, his photographer's vest heavy with water, his expensive Nikon camera still hanging around his neck. He stared at the river with the blank expression of someone in deep shock. His lips were blue. He was shaking violently. "Tyler!" Jennifer shouted. "Tyler Dawson, I'm Ranger Nakamura. Step away from the river." Tyler didn't respond. He took a step forward into the water, and Jennifer lunged, grabbing his arm, pulling him back. His skin was ice cold, hypothermic, and his eyes didn't focus on her. "She wants me," Tyler whispered. She says I took her picture without permission. She says I stole her image. She says I have to pay. Jennifer dragged Tyler away from the river, her training overriding her fear. Hypothermia first, explanations later. She pulled emergency blankets from her pack, wrapped Tyler in reflective mylar, started documenting his condition. Core temperature dangerously low, cognition impaired, pupils responsive, but sluggish. Tyler, how long have you been in the water? Hours, days, forever. She keeps pulling me under, and I drown, and then I'm breathing again, and she pulls me under again, over and over. I can't keep. His words cut off as the river erupted. Water surged upward, defying gravity, forming a column, a shape, a woman rising from the current. This Yurei was different from the others. Older, angrier, her white burial kimono pristine despite the water. Her face was beautiful and terrible, features sharp, expression full of rage. Around her neck hung prayer beads, and in her hand, she held a small cloth doll, the kind used in traditional Japanese funerals. You photographed me, the Yurei said, her voice layered, multiple voices speaking as one. You pointed your machine at my resting place and captured my image without permission, without prayer, without respect. You have disturbed my peace. You must pay the price. Jennifer stepped between Tyler and the Yurei, her mind racing through everything her grandmother had told her about Japanese ghosts. Yurei couldn't be fought physically. They couldn't be killed. They were already dead, but they could be placated sometimes if you understood what they wanted. What price? Jennifer asked. What would satisfy your vengeance? The Yurei's eyes fixed on Jennifer, black and bottomless. You. The one who let a child drown. You carry guilt already. You carry water in your lungs, in your heart. You are halfway to becoming like me. Give yourself to the river, and I will release him. Jennifer felt the pull of the Yurei's words, felt the truth in them. She did carry guilt. She did wake up drowning. Part of her had been underwater since Sophie Chen died. Maybe the Yurei was right. Maybe drowning was what she deserved. She took a step toward the river. Tyler grabbed her arm, his grip weak, but desperate. No, don't. She's lying. I've seen what she does. She takes and never stops. If you go in, we both die. Jennifer stopped, Tyler's words cutting through the Yurei's hypnotic pull. She looked at Tyler, really looked at him, and saw someone who'd been terrorized for hours but was still fighting, still trying to help despite his own fear. You're right, Jennifer said. She turned back to the Yurei. You say I carry guilt. You say I let a child drown. You're correct. I failed Sophie Chen. I'll carry that failure for the rest of my life. But I won't fail Tyler Dawson. I won't let you take him, the Yurei screamed, and the sound was like water filling lungs, like the moment of drowning, like every nightmare Jennifer had experienced since Sophie's death. The river surged, waves crashing impossibly high, water reaching for them like grasping hands. Jennifer pulled Tyler backward away from the river's edge, but the water followed, spreading across the forest floor, rising inch by inch. The Yurei multiplied, dozens of drowned spirits rising from the river, all of them moving toward Jennifer and Tyler with unified purpose. Jennifer's radio crackled. Impossible, it had fallen away earlier, and a voice came through speaking Japanese. Guangmin Jingen, Guangmin Jingen wo changeyo. The mantra of light. Chant to the mantra of light. Her grandmother's voice, dead for 2 years but unmistakable, and Jennifer remembered suddenly that her grandmother had given her something before she died. A small omamori charm, a protection amulet. Jennifer had kept it in her ranger vest's inner pocket, half forgotten. She pulled out the charm now, red fabric embroidered with gold, containing prayers written by monks at a shrine in Kyoto. Her grandmother had insisted she carry it, had said some dangers couldn't be fought with modern tools. The Yurei recoiled, their advance stopping. The lead spirit, the one from the river, shrieked, her face distorting, becoming something monstrous. Buddhist prayers. You dare use sacred words against me? "I dare use whatever works," Jennifer said. She didn't know the mantra of light by heart, but she knew other prayers, other words her grandmother had taught her. She began to speak, words in Japanese she barely understood, protective mantras, blessings for the dead. The Uri writhed, their forms becoming less solid, the water they commanded receding. But the lead spirit remained, her hatred palpable, and she pointed at Jennifer with a finger that dripped black water. "You cannot save everyone," the Uri hissed. "You will fail again. You will watch someone drown again. And next time the Omamori will not protect you. Next time I will take you both." The spirits dissolved. The water vanished as if it had never existed. And Jennifer and Tyler collapsed on suddenly dry moss, both of them shaking, both of them alive. Jennifer radioed for emergency extraction, called in Tyler's condition, requested immediate medevac. A helicopter arrived 20 minutes later, military fast, and took Tyler to Olympic Medical Center in Port Angeles. Jennifer hiked out alone, collected Tyler's equipment, filed her report. The official record stated, "Visitor experienced hypothermia and disorientation after falling in tributary stream. Rescued by responding ranger. No permanent injuries. Recommended improved trail signage near water features. No mention of Uri. No mention of drowned spirits, no mention of Japanese ghosts haunting America's rainforests." But Jennifer knew, and Tyler knew. He left the hospital 2 days later, went home to Seattle, and never returned to Olympic National Park. He sold his camera equipment, switched careers, became a graphic designer who worked entirely indoors. When asked about his photographs from the Hoh rainforest, he said they'd been lost in a water accident. He never elaborated. Jennifer continued working as a ranger, but she researched everything she could find about Olympic National Park's drowning victims, all 37 of them since 1938. She learned their names, their stories, how they'd died. She visited their memorial sites when she could, left offerings, spoke prayers her grandmother had taught her, and she kept the Omamori with her always, because the Uri had been right about one thing. Jennifer would fail again someday. Everyone failed. Everyone let someone down. The question was whether you kept trying despite the failures, or whether you let guilt drown you while you still breathed. Jennifer chose to keep trying. But sometimes on foggy mornings when the mist hung thick over the Hoh rainforest, when the moss dripped endlessly and the river ran high, Jennifer heard Sophie Chen's voice calling from the trees, heard the accusations, the blame, the reminder of her failure. And sometimes she saw them, the Uri standing between the ancient trees, their white clothes dripping, their black hair trailing water, their eyes full of hatred and sorrow, watching her, waiting for her next failure, ready to drag her down into the water she'd been drowning in since Sophie died. The rainforest remembered. The water remembered. And the dead were patient. They had time. They had centuries. They would wait for Jennifer Nakamura to fail again, and when she did, they would be ready. And next time, no Omamori charm would save her from joining them in their endless, drowning rage. But until that day came, Jennifer would keep working, keep helping, keep trying to balance the ledger Sophie's death had unbalanced. She would save who she could save. She would fail when she failed. And she would live with both, because that was what being human meant. Carrying guilt and hope simultaneously, drowning and breathing at the same time, knowing the Uri waited, but refusing to surrender to them. The Hall of Moss's trail remained open. The river continued flowing. The rain kept falling. And in the deepest parts of the forest where the moss grew thickest and the light never fully penetrated, the drowned spirits waited, their patience infinite, their vengeance eternal, their wet footprints appearing on trails where no one walked, their voices calling to those who carried guilt, inviting them into the water, into the drowning, into the cold embrace of Onryo's eternal rage. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. The voicemail was time-stamped 11:47 p.m., 3 hours after Madison Garcia had been declared missing, and Robert Fitzgerald could hear something breathing behind his daughter's terrified whisper. He played it again, the 5th time in as many minutes, his hands shaking as he pressed the phone against his ear. Madison's voice came through, barely audible over static that shouldn't exist on a digital recording. "Dad? Dad, please. I don't know where I am. It's so dark. There's someone here, something. Dad, please find me, please, I'm so scared, The message cut off abruptly, replaced by 3 seconds of that breathing. Not labored breathing, not frightened breathing. Steady. Patient. The breathing of something that had all the time in the world. Robert checked the timestamp again, as though the numbers might have changed. 11:47 p.m., October 3rd, 2006. But Madison had been reported missing at 8:30 p.m. when she failed to return from a solo day hike on the Hoh River Trail. He'd received the call from Park Dispatch at 9:15 p.m., had been driving toward Olympic National Park ever since, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel for 3 hours of wet Washington roads. Madison couldn't have left that voicemail at 11:47 p.m. She couldn't have had cell service in the backcountry even if she'd wanted to. The Hoh rainforest had no towers, no reception, nothing but ancient trees and constant rain, and the kind of darkness that predated human understanding. But the message existed. Her voice existed. That breathing existed. Robert pulled into the ranger station at the Hoh Rainforest Visitor Center at 12:30 a.m. 2 rangers were coordinating the search, a woman in her 50s named Patricia and a younger man whose name Robert forgot immediately. They had maps spread across a table, flashlight beams crisscrossing the topographic lines. "Mr. Fitzgerald," Patricia said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd done this too many times. "We have teams sweeping the main trail. Your daughter's last known position was at the 5 Mile Island campsite. She signed the trail register at 2 p.m. Another hiker saw her around 3:30 p.m. heading back toward the trailhead, but she never arrived." "She called me," Robert said, holding up his phone. "After she was reported missing. After you called me. Listen to this." He played the voicemail. Both rangers listened, their expressions shifting from professional concern to confusion. "That's impossible," the younger ranger said. "There's no cell service anywhere on that trail. Even satellite phones are unreliable under the canopy. And yet here it is." Robert's voice was harder than he intended. My daughter's voice, asking for help. "Are we going to stand here discussing the impossibility, or are we going to find her?" Patricia held up her hands, placating. "We're doing everything we can. But Mr. Fitzgerald, you need to understand. The Hoh Rainforest is one of the most challenging search environments in the country. Limited visibility, dense vegetation, constant rain, and the river makes everything dangerous. We have experienced SR teams out there right now, but it's going to take time. Then let me help. I know these trails. I used to bring Madison here every summer when she was little, before the divorce, before she moved to Seattle with her mother." Robert's voice cracked on that last part, and he hated himself for it. "Please, she's 17, she's my daughter, I can't just sit here." The rangers exchanged glances. Robert knew what they were thinking. Distraught parent, liability, someone else to worry about in already difficult conditions. But he also knew they couldn't legally stop him from entering a public trail. "If you go out there," Patricia said finally, "you stay on marked trails. You check in every hour on your radio. And if conditions deteriorate further, you come back immediately. Understood?" Robert nodded, already moving toward his truck to grab his gear. He'd been a ranger himself once, 20 years ago, before Madison was born, before he'd taken the steadier job with the Forest Service that involved more desk work and less field time. He still maintained his wilderness first aid certification, still kept emergency equipment in his vehicle, still remembered the protocols even if his body was 20 years older. The rain was constant as he headed up the Hoh River Trail, his headlamp beam barely penetrating the darkness. The temperate rainforest pressed in from all sides, massive Sitka spruces and western hemlocks rising into invisible canopy, their trunks draped with club moss that glowed an eerie green in his light. The trail was a river of mud, and the actual Hoh River roared somewhere to his left, swollen from days of October rain. Robert tried Madison's cell phone every 5 minutes, knowing it was futile, but unable to stop himself. No service, no connection, just dead air, and the futile hope that somehow, impossibly, she might answer. He reached 5 Mile Island at 2 a.m. The campsite was empty, yellow caution tape marking where the search teams had already processed the scene. Robert ducked under the tape, not caring about protocols, and examined the area with his flashlight. Madison's backpack leaned against a moss-covered log. Robert's hands trembled as he opened it, inventorying the contents with a father's intimate knowledge. Her journal, the leather one he'd given her for her 16th birthday, a Canon point-and-shoot camera, water bottles, mostly full, energy bars, untouched, first aid kit, unused. Everything was here, everything except Madison. He opened the journal, flipping to the last entry. Her handwriting, recognizable and precious, filled the page. October 3rd, 3:00 p.m. Made it to 5 Mile Island. The forest is incredible, so green it hurts to look at. Found some interesting fungi specimens near the river. We'll photograph before heading back. There's something weird here, though. A smell, like copper and old meat, and the birds have stopped singing. Dad always said to trust instincts in the wilderness. Mine are screaming at me to leave. But I want to get photos of the fungi first. They're growing in a pattern I've never seen before, almost like a circle, like someone planted them deliberately. Later, the fungi circle is bigger than I thought, at least 20 feet across. There are bones in the center. Animal bones? They look old. There's writing carved into the trees around the circle. Not English. Not any language I recognize. Eastern European, maybe? I'm taking photos, but I'm getting seriously creeped out. Time to go. Later. Something followed me from the fungi circle. I can hear it in the trees. It's not moving like an animal. It's too deliberate, too intelligent. And the smell is stronger now. I'm heading back to the trail, going to walk fast and not look back. Dad, if you're reading this and I'm not around to stop you, I'm sorry for whatever you're about to go through. The entry ended there, mid-thought, as though Madison had been interrupted. Robert's radio crackled. Fitzgerald, this is base. Status check. I'm at 5 Mile Island, he said, his voice steady despite the ice in his stomach. Found her journal. Last entry mentions following something and fungi arranged in a circle with bones. I'm going to find this circle. Negative, Fitzgerald. That's off trail. Too dangerous in these conditions. Return to the marked trail. My daughter is out here somewhere. I'm finding that circle. He switched off the radio before Patricia could respond and pulled out Madison's camera. 47 photos on the memory card. He scrolled through them, his thumb wet from rain and shaking from something that wasn't cold. The first 30 photos were typical Madison. Artistic shots of moss patterns, light filtering through the canopy, the river in motion. Then the fungi appeared. Chanterelles, or something similar, growing in a perfect ring. The next photo showed the bones Madison had mentioned. Deer skulls, he thought at first, but the proportions were wrong, too elongated, too human. Photo 37 showed the carved trees. The symbols were crude but deliberate, and Robert recognized them from somewhere deep in his memory. 20 years ago, when he'd been a younger ranger, an older colleague had shown him similar markings. Old country superstitions, the man had said. Romanian immigrants who settled in the Pacific Northwest in the 1800s. They brought their folklore with them, their fears. This particular symbol is a ward, meant to trap something in, or keep something out. The final photos on Madison's camera made Robert's breath catch. They were blurred, taken while running, but he could make out shapes in the background. Humanoid but wrong. Too tall, limbs bent at incorrect angles, moving through the trees with a fluidity that suggested joints that didn't exist. And in the last photo, barely visible in the edge of the frame, a face. Pale, gaunt, with eyes that reflected the camera flash like an animal's. But the expression was human, intelligent, hungry. Robert's phone buzzed. Another voicemail. He fumbled it from his pocket, nearly dropping it in the mud. "Dad?" Madison's voice, but different now. Flatter. "Don't come looking for me, it's too late, I don't know what I am anymore. It bit me, Dad, at the circle. It bit me and then it showed me things. Memories. It's memories. Centuries of memories. People who came to the forest and never left. People it turned. People it made into what it is." A pause, filled with that same breathing from the first message. "I'm so cold, Dad. But I'm not afraid anymore. Isn't that strange? I should be terrified, but I'm just empty and hungry, so hungry. You need to leave. You need to go back to Seattle and forget you had a daughter named Madison. Because what's walking around in this forest wearing my face isn't her anymore." The message ended. Robert stood frozen in the rain, the phone slipping from his numb fingers into the mud. A voicemail sent from a place with no cell service. A daughter who claimed she wasn't his daughter anymore. And somewhere in this rainforest, something ancient and evil that wore human faces and fed on human flesh. He found the fungi circle at 3:30 a.m., exactly where Madison's photos suggested it would be. The bones were still there, arranged with deliberate care around a central depression in the earth. The carved trees surrounded the clearing, their symbols weathered but still legible in his headlamp beam. And there were more bones now. Fresh ones, still red with tissue. Robert's radio crackled despite being turned off. Madison's voice came through the speaker, but wrong, layered with something underneath that sounded like grinding stone. "Hello, Father. I'm glad you came. I wanted you to see. I wanted you to understand what I've become." Movement at the edge of the clearing. Robert spun, his headlamp catching a figure between the trees. Madison, or something wearing her shape. She wore the same hiking clothes she'd had on when she left Seattle yesterday morning. But they were torn and stained with mud and something darker. Her skin was pale, waxy, wrong in the artificial light, and her eyes reflected his headlamp beam, twin points of red that belonged to a predator, not a girl. "Madison?" His voice broke on her name. "Not anymore. That name belongs to someone who died yesterday. Someone young and warm and alive. I remember being her. I remember loving you. I remember every summer in this forest. Every lesson you taught me about respecting the wilderness. But those memories feel like someone else's, like a story I was told." She stepped into the clearing, and Robert saw the bite mark on her neck. Deep, ragged, already infected with something that made the flesh around it look mottled and gray. "What happened to you?" "The strigoi," she said, and the word felt heavy with age and horror. "That's what it called itself. What it made me. The original one is old, Dad. So old. It came here with Romanian loggers in 1887, and it's been feeding on hikers and hunters ever since. The forest hides the bodies. The rain washes away the blood. And every few decades, when it gets lonely, it makes a new one. Someone to share the hunger with. Someone to help it hunt." Robert's hand found the knife on his belt, though he knew with terrible certainty that a blade wouldn't help against what his daughter had become. "You're still in there," he said desperately. "Madison, you're still in there. We can get you help. Medical attention. There has to be a cure. Something. There is no cure for being dead, Dad." She moved closer, and Robert could smell her now. That copper and old meat scent from Madison's journal entry, mixed with decay and something else. Something that made his hindbrain scream warnings. "My heart stopped beating 12 hours ago. My blood is cold. My body is decomposing even as it walks and talks and pretends to be human. But the thing inside me, the infection or spirit or whatever it is, it keeps the meat animated, keeps it functional, keeps it hungry. Then fight it. You're strong, Madison. You're my daughter. You can fight this." She laughed, and the sound was wrong, pitched in a register that made his ears hurt. "I don't want to fight it. Don't you understand? The hunger is everything now. It's purpose. It's meaning. It's the only thing that makes this cold, dead existence bearable." More movement at the clearing's edge. Another figure, and then another. bodies in various states of decay, all wearing the tattered remains of hiking gear from different decades. The Strigoy's other children, Robert realized. How many people had disappeared in Olympic National Park over the years? How many had been dismissed as lost hikers or animal attacks? "You brought friends," Madison said, following his gaze. "They're curious about you. My father, the ranger, the man who taught me to love these woods. They want to know if you taste different because of our connection, if love flavors the meat." Robert backed toward the edge of the clearing, his mind racing through impossible options. Run? He'd never make it. Fight? Against multiple undead predators, call for help? His radio was dead, his phone had no service, and even if rescue came, what could they do against this? "I don't want to hurt you, Dad," Madison said, and for just a moment her voice sounded like herself, young, frightened, human. "But the hunger, it's so strong, and you're right here, and you smell so alive." The other Strigoi were closing in, forming a circle around Robert. He counted 7 of them, including Madison, 7 dead things wearing human shapes, all focused on him with that same hungry attention. "What do you want from me?" Robert asked, surprised by how steady his voice remained. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. Don't make me watch my daughter become a monster first." "But that's exactly what I need you to see," Madison said. "The original Strigoi, the one who made me, it told me something important. It said the only way to truly turn is to feed on someone you loved in life, someone whose blood carries meaning. Without that, we're just corpses that walk. But with it, we become immortal, unkillable, eternal." Understanding hit Robert like a physical blow. "You need me. I need you to choose," Madison corrected. "Let me feed, and I become something greater than human. Something that will walk these forests for centuries. Or stop me somehow and let me rot into the earth like I should have yesterday. Either way, you're not leaving this clearing alive. But you can choose what your death means." Robert's hand tightened on his knife. Could he use it on his own daughter? Even knowing she was already dead, even seeing what she'd become, could he drive a blade into her heart? One of the other Strigoi lunged forward, impatient. Robert spun, slashing with the knife, and felt the blade connect with cold, dead flesh. The creature recoiled, black fluid oozing from the wound, but it wasn't enough to stop it. Another Strigoi grabbed Robert's arm, its grip impossibly strong, fingers digging into his flesh with enough force to make bones creak. "Stop!" Madison's voice commanding. The other Strigoi froze, and the one holding Robert released him. "He's mine. My choice, my kill." She approached slowly, and Robert could see the struggle in her expression. Whatever Madison had been fighting against it, trying to hold on to the humanity that was slipping away with every passing moment. "I love you, sweetheart," Robert said quietly. "No matter what you've become, no matter what you do, you're still my daughter. You're still the little girl who used to collect mushrooms and name the trees and fall asleep during our camping trips with her head on my shoulder." Madison stopped, something flickering in those red reflecting eyes. Don't make this harder than it already is." "I'm not going to fight you," Robert said, making a decision that felt both insane and absolutely right. "If this is what you need, if feeding on me gives you, I don't know, peace, completion, whatever it is you're looking for, then do it. But know that I love you, that I've always loved you, that even now, standing here facing what you've become, I love you." He put down the knife, stood unarmed in the center of the clearing, waiting. Madison moved closer, and Robert could see she was crying, dead eyes producing real tears that ran down waxy cheeks. You can't just give up. That's not who you are. You're supposed to be strong, supposed to survive, supposed to protect my daughter," Robert interrupted. "And I am. I'm protecting you from the guilt of taking a life against their will. I'm protecting whatever's left of the girl I raised from becoming a monster. You want my blood? It's yours. You've always had my heart anyway." The other Strigoi were stirring restlessly, but Madison held up her hand, keeping them back. She stood inches from Robert now, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from her dead flesh. I remember everything, she whispered. Every birthday, every Christmas, every stupid argument about homework and curfews. I remember you teaching me to identify edible mushrooms when I was 6. I remember you crying at my 8th grade graduation. I remember the last time I told you I loved you 3 weeks ago, and I meant it even though I was mad at you for missing my art show. I remember too, Robert said softly. All of it. And I wouldn't trade a single moment, even knowing it led to this. Madison's hands rose to his throat, fingers cold as ice against his skin. Robert didn't flinch, didn't fight, just looked into his daughter's eyes and tried to see the girl he'd raised, tried to believe she was still in there somewhere. I can't, Madison said suddenly, stepping back. I can't do it. Even with the hunger screaming at me, even with every instinct demanding that I feed, I can't kill you. I'm still your daughter. I'm still Madison Garcia, who's afraid of spiders and loves pizza with pineapple and wants to study mycology at the University of Washington. I'm still her. I have to still be her. The other Strigoi moved then, no longer held back by Madison's command. They rushed forward in a coordinated attack, and Robert understood that if Madison wouldn't feed, they would. But Madison stepped between them and her father, her body shielding his, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that came from somewhere deeper than death. No, he's under my protection. Mine. And I will tear apart anyone who touches him. The Strigoi hesitated, and Robert saw the hierarchy revealed. Madison was new, recently turned, but she was stronger somehow. The daughter of a ranger who'd loved these forests, maybe that meant something. Maybe that gave her power in this place. The oldest Strigoi stepped forward. A woman, or what had been a woman, dressed in rotted clothes from the 1950s. When she spoke, her voice was a chorus of the dead. You reject the feeding? Then you reject the transformation. You'll decay, child. Rot from within. In a week, you'll be mindless. In a month, you'll be dust. The only thing that sustains us is human blood, human life. Without it, death takes us properly. Then let it, Madison said. I'd rather be dust than a monster who ate her own father. The old Strigoi laughed, a sound like breaking bones. Sentimental foolishness. You'll regret it when the pain starts, when your body begins to truly decompose. You'll beg us to teach you to hunt. I won't. I'll walk into the river. Let the water take me. Let me disappear like I should have yesterday. The Strigoi considered this, then nodded slowly. So be it. But the father stays here. He's seen too much, knows too much. We can't let him leave. Then I'll stay too, Madison said. I'll watch over him. Make sure you keep your distance. And when I finally fall apart, when there's nothing left of me but bones, maybe he'll be brave enough to walk away then. The old Strigoi smiled, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. An interesting solution. Very well. We accept your terms. You and your father may remain in this clearing, but the moment you try to leave, the moment you break our agreement, we feed on you both, understood? Madison nodded, and the other Strigoi melted back into the forest, vanishing between the trees as though they'd never been there. The clearing fell silent except for the constant rain and the distant roar of the Ho River. Robert sank to the ground, his legs finally giving out. What just happened? I bought us time, Madison said, sitting beside him. Maybe a week, maybe less. My body is already breaking down, I can feel it. Everything's starting to hurt in ways that living bodies don't hurt. And the hunger. Dad, the hunger is like having fire in my veins. But I'm not going to feed. I'm not going to become what they are. There has to be another way. Some way to stop this, to reverse it. There isn't. The old stories are true, Dad. The Strigoi legend, the vampire myths, they're all based on something real, something that spreads through bites and turns the dead into predators. The only cure is destruction. Fire or decapitation, according to the memories I inherited. And I don't have the courage to ask you to do that to me. Robert pulled his daughter close, not caring that her body was cold, that she smelled of decay, that she wasn't entirely human anymore. She was still Madison, still his little girl. And he had 1 week to figure out how to save her, or how to let her go. The rain continued through the night. Robert held Madison as she shook with the effort of resisting the hunger, as her body slowly deteriorated, as the infection that had killed her worked to remake her into something monstrous. She told him everything, about the original Strigoi, about the bite, about the moment her heart stopped and something else started. She described the hunger in terms that made Robert's stomach churn and his heart break. By dawn, she was weaker, her skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and the bite wound on her neck was spreading, the infection radiating outward in black veins. She couldn't stand without help, and her voice was fading. "Dad," she whispered as pale morning light filtered through the canopy. "You need to do it. You need to end this. I won't last much longer, and when I finally lose control of the hunger, I'll attack you. I won't be able to stop myself. Please." While I'm still me enough to ask, Robert's hands shook as he picked up his knife. "I can't. Madison, I can't. You have to. It's the only mercy left, the only way to make sure I don't hurt anyone else. Please, Dad, do this one last thing for me." He thought about all the moments of her life. First steps, first day of school, first heartbreak. Teaching her to identify plants, to read a compass, to respect the wilderness. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee kissed better. Every teenage argument that seemed so important at the time. 17 years of being her father, and it all came down to this. One impossible choice in a rainforest clearing. "I love you," Robert said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "I love you too, Dad. Thank you for everything, for being the best father a girl could ask for teaching me to love the forest even though it killed me, for coming to find me even though you knew it was dangerous, for being here at the end." Robert pressed the knife against Madison's heart, his vision blurred with tears. She put her cold hand over his, helping him hold steady, and smiled. It was her real smile, the one he remembered from happier times. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's okay to let me go." He pushed the blade home in one quick motion, the way he'd been trained to field dress game, making it fast and clean. Madison gasped once, her eyes going wide, and then the red reflection faded from them. Whatever had been keeping her animated, the Strigoi infection or spirit or curse, released its hold. She collapsed against him, and this time when she died, it was final. Robert held his daughter's body and wept. He wept for the life she'd never have, for the future stolen from her, for the impossible choice he'd been forced to make. He wept until there were no more tears, and then he simply sat, numb and hollow as the rain continued to fall. The old Strigoi appeared at the clearing's edge as the sun rose higher. She regarded Robert with something that might have been respect. "You kept your word," she said. She kept hers. "We'll honor the agreement. You may leave." "Just like that? After everything?" "Just like that. Your daughter chose nobility over hunger. That's rare among our kind. She deserves to be honored, not consumed. Bury her deep, Ranger. Make sure she stays buried. The infection dies with the host, but only if the body is properly laid to rest." Robert dug for hours, using his knife and bare hands to carve a grave in the soft forest floor. He wrapped Madison in his jacket, placed her journal and camera beside her, and covered her with earth and stones. No marker, no ceremony. Just a father burying his daughter in the forest she'd loved. He walked out of Olympic National Park at sunset, muddy and exhausted and forever changed. At the ranger station, Patricia took one look at him and asked no questions. She filed a report stating that Madison Garcia's body had been recovered and buried in accordance with family wishes in the backcountry, which was true enough. The official cause of death was listed as animal attack. Robert never spoke about what really happened in that clearing. He returned to his desk job with the Forest Service, went through the motions of living and tried to forget. But on October nights when the rain fell hard and he couldn't sleep, he thought about Madison, about her courage in resisting the hunger, about her choice to die human rather than live as a monster. He kept her journal but never read past that last entry. Some words were too painful to revisit. He kept her camera, but never looked at the final photos again. Some images were better left forgotten. Years later, when Robert finally retired, he donated a large sum to Olympic National Park for trail maintenance and safety equipment. Anonymous, no recognition required. It was the only memorial he could give Madison, making sure future hikers were safer, that other families wouldn't suffer what he'd endured. But he never returned to the Hoh rainforest, never hiked those trails again. The place held too many ghosts, too many memories, too much pain. The forest had taken his daughter and forced him to mercy kill her animated corpse. Some wounds didn't heal, some choices haunted you forever. On the anniversary of Madison's death every year, Robert received a single voicemail. No number, no timestamp, just his daughter's voice saying 6 words. "Thank you, Dad. I love you." Each year he listened, and each year he wept, and each year he wondered if it was truly her spirit reaching out, or just his grief manifesting in impossible ways. He never figured out the answer, and maybe that was appropriate. Madison's last days had been defined by the impossible made real, by folklore proved fact, by the thin line between life and death revealed as far more permeable than science acknowledged. Robert Fitzgerald died in 2031, an old man with a quiet life and a secret that crushed him. His last words, according to the hospice nurse, were, "I'm coming, sweetheart. Dad's coming." Whether he was reunited with his daughter and whatever came after, or whether death was simply the end, no one could say. But in Olympic National Park, deep in the Hoh rainforest, a grave sits unmarked and undisturbed. And on October nights when the rain falls and the darkness presses close, some hikers report hearing a young woman's voice calling for her father. The rangers dismiss it as wind or imagination. But those who've spent time in the deep wilderness know better. They know that some bonds transcend death, that love persists even when bodies fail, that in places old and wild and saturated with blood and sorrow, the past never truly releases its grip on the present. Madison Garcia died at 17 in 2006. Her father died 25 years later. And somewhere in the space between, in the dark places where folklore and reality blur, a daughter waited for her father to find her one last time. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. David, you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The voice on the radio belonged to Sarah Chen, the veteran ranger who'd trained David Ramirez for the past 4 months. But something was wrong with it. The cadence was off, words coming too fast, syllables running together like she was speaking through water. "Sarah?" Ramirez pressed the transmit button on his Motorola radio. "You're breaking up. Say again?" "Don't trust what you see. Don't trust what you hear. Don't trust..." Static swallowed the rest, then cleared. "Following you. It's been following you since Cades Cove. Check behind you. Check now." Ramirez spun, hand dropping instinctively to the can of bear spray on his belt. The trail behind him was empty. Just the standard Appalachian summer afternoon, all green humidity and cicada buzz. He was 3 miles up the Anthony Creek Trail in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, well within the boundaries of the most visited park in America. It was July 2015, 78 degrees, and there were probably 50 other hikers within a 2-mile radius. Nothing to be afraid of. "Sarah, I don't see anything. What's going on?" No response. Just static, then silence. Ramirez had been a park ranger for exactly 4 months and 6 days. This was his first real assignment after training, his first solo patrol, his first time being responsible for anything more serious than giving directions to tourists. He'd taken the job because it seemed safe. Great Smoky Mountains wasn't Denali or Yellowstone, wasn't somewhere you had to worry about grizzlies or avalanches. It was a tourist park, family-friendly, the kind of place where the biggest danger was usually someone trying to take a selfie with a black bear. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Sarah's voice. It was his voice, David Ramirez's voice, speaking words he wasn't saying. "Turn around. Look behind the big oak. Third tree from the trail. You'll see. Ramirez's blood went cold. He wasn't transmitting. His finger wasn't on the button, but his own voice continued, calm and helpful. Connor Burke is there. What's left of him? You wanted to find him, didn't you? 4 days missing, presumed lost, but he's not lost. He's very, very found. Connor Burke. The missing person case that had brought Ramirez out here in the first place. 35 years old. Professional photographer. Last seen on July 18th hiking the Anthony Creek Trail with enough camera equipment to film a documentary. His wife had reported him missing when he didn't return to their rental cabin. Standard procedure. Check his last known location. Look for signs of injury or distress. Probably find him with a twisted ankle waiting for help. Except now Ramirez's own voice was coming through the radio, telling him to look behind a tree. He approached the oak slowly. It was massive. Probably 300 years old, trunk thick enough that 3 people holding hands couldn't encircle it. The bark was scarred with deep gouges that looked fresh, sap still weeping from the wounds. And behind it, partially hidden by a tangle of rhododendron, Ramirez's stomach lurched. It was a pile of clothes. Burke's clothes, based on the description from the missing person report. North Face hiking pants, REI shirt, Morel boots. They were arranged carefully, almost lovingly, folded and stacked like someone had taken them off to go swimming. But there was no body, just the clothes, and inside them, fur. Dark fur, coarse and thick, mixed with what looked like skin that had been shed like a snake's. And on top of the pile, Burke's Canon 5D Mark III camera, lens pointing up at the canopy. The power light was on. Recording. Ramirez grabbed the camera, hands shaking. The LCD screen showed 3 hours, 47 minutes of footage. He hit play, and Connor Burke's face filled the frame, sweating, terrified, whispering directly into the lens. If you're watching this, don't come looking for me. I'm not myself anymore. It started 3 days ago. I was photographing a deer near Cades Cove and I saw something wrong with it. Its legs were bending backward and its eyes, God, its eyes were human. It saw me seeing it, and it smiled. Burke's hands were trembling so badly the image shook. That night I heard my wife's voice outside my tent. But she wasn't on this trip. She was back at the cabin. The voice sounded exactly like her, calling my name, saying she was lost and needed help. I almost went out. Almost. But I looked through the tent flap and saw. The image jerked as Burke fumbled with the camera. When it steadied, it showed the tent entrance. Through the mesh, something stood in the moonlight. Roughly human-shaped but wrong, proportions off, moving with a fluidity that made Ramirez's eyes hurt. And its face cycled through expressions like someone flipping through a photo album. Burke's wife, then Burke himself, then people Ramirez didn't recognize, then faces that weren't quite human at all. Skinwalker, Burke whispered. I'm from Arizona originally. My grandmother was Navajo. She told me stories about Yinald-Lushi, witches who wear animal skins to transform. I thought they were legends, metaphors. But this thing, it's real, and it's hunting me. And I think, Burke's voice broke. I think it's getting inside me. I feel it in my head, thoughts that aren't mine, hunger for things I shouldn't want. My hands. Look at my hands. He held them up to the camera. The fingers were too long, joints bending at extra angles, and the skin was peeling, revealing dark fur underneath. It touches you and you change. It gets in through your skin, through your thoughts. It wears you like a costume. And the worst part is, Burke's eyes filled with tears. The worst part is it feels good. It feels right. Like I'm finally becoming what I was always supposed to be. The video ended. Ramirez dropped the camera like it had burned him. His radio erupted with sound, not static this time, but voices, dozens of them, all talking at once. Some sounded human, others didn't. And threading through all of them was Sarah Chen's voice, saying over and over, "Don't let it touch you. Don't let it touch you. Don't let it." A branch snapped behind him. Ramirez turned and saw a deer standing on the trail. Normal white-tailed doe, probably 120 pounds, watching him with liquid brown eyes. Except Deer didn't stand that still. Deer didn't stare without blinking, and Deer absolutely didn't smile. Its jaw unhinged, dropping far too low, revealing teeth that were flat and human-looking. When it spoke, the voice was Connor Burke's. "You're wondering if I'm still in here. I am. Sort of. It's hard to explain. We're both here now. Both sharing. It's not so bad once you stop fighting." Ramirez backed away slowly. The deer, the thing that looked like a deer, took a step forward, and its front legs bent backward with a wet cracking sound. It rose up on its hind legs, body elongating, spine extending. The fur rippled like water, revealing patches of human skin underneath. And the face was Connor Burke's. But it was also still deer, features overlapping impossibly, existing in the same space. Deer snout and human nose, antlers growing from Burke's temples, eyes that were both brown and yellow and hungry. "It wants to meet you," Burke said through that impossible mouth. "It's been watching you for days, ever since you started working here. Fresh meat, untrained, vulnerable, perfect." "What are you?" Ramirez managed, voice cracking. "I told you. Skinwalker, ye Nald Lushi. The ones who walk on all fours wearing skins that aren't their own. We're old, David. Older than your parks, older than your governments. We were here when these mountains were young, and we'll be here when they're dust." The thing that wore Burke took another step closer. Its body kept shifting, deer to human to something in between, never settling on one form. "The Navajo know about us. They have rules. Don't say our name after dark. Don't look if you hear your name called in the woods. Don't follow voices. Don't—" It smiled wider. "Don't let us touch you." Ramirez ran. Behind him, laughter echoed. Burke's laugh, then Sarah's, then his own. Then sounds that weren't laughter at all, but something that mimicked the emotion without understanding it. The forest erupted with noise, footsteps running parallel to him on both sides, branches breaking, voices calling his name in a dozen different pitches and accents. He burst off the trail into thick undergrowth, rhododendron slapping his face, thorns catching his uniform. No destination in mind, just away, just not here, just anywhere but near that thing that had been Connor Burke and was now something else entirely. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Ramirez screamed and spun, bear spray already in his hand, finger on the trigger. But it was Sarah Chen. Actually Sarah this time, looking just as terrified as he felt. "David, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. The radio's been compromised. It's been imitating me, hasn't it?" Ramirez nodded, gasping. "Burke. I found Burke. I know. I've been tracking it for 3 days, ever since we found the first body." Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him deeper into the forest. "There's a shelter 1/2 mile from here. Old CCC cabin built in the 30s. It has iron reinforcement in the door frame. Iron interferes with their transformation. We'll be safe there." They ran together, Sarah leading. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew these trails intimately, and Ramirez followed blindly, trusting her experience. "How many?" he gasped. "How many has it killed?" "7 that we know of. But it's been here longer than that. Decades, maybe. The old-timers in Gatlinburg talk about people disappearing in these mountains going back to the 1920s. We thought it was just dangerous terrain, black bears, the usual explanations. But there were always weird details. Clothes found perfectly folded, tracks that changed from human to animal mid-stride, witnesses reporting impossible things. The cabin appeared through the trees, rough-hewn logs, slate roof, looking like it had grown from the forest itself. Sarah pushed through the door and Ramirez stumbled in after her, slamming it shut. There was indeed iron in the door frame, old nails and strapping reinforcement from a time when builders knew things that modern construction had forgotten. "We're safe," Ramirez panted. "For now." Sarah moved to a window, peering out through gaps in the shutters. It can't cross iron in its transformed state, but it's patient. It'll wait. And eventually we have to leave. Ramirez finished. "How do we fight it?" Sarah turned to look at him and her expression was odd, sympathetic, sad, resigned. "David, There's something you need to understand about skinwalkers. They're not just shapeshifters. They're witches, humans who gave up their humanity through terrible rituals. Murder, usually. Cannibalism. They break the deepest taboos, and in exchange, they gain power. The ability to wear skins, to steal voices, to change forms. But they never stop being human underneath. That's what makes them so dangerous. They understand us, they know our fears, our weaknesses. They know exactly what to say, exactly how to act to make us trust them. Okay, but how do we? They also gain the ability to infect others. A scratch, a bite, sometimes just prolonged contact. The victim starts to change. Slowly at first. Thoughts that aren't their own, instincts that are too animal. Then physical changes. Extra joints, fur under the skin, bones that reshape themselves. Eventually, the original person is gone, replaced by something new, something that serves the original skinwalker. Ramirez felt cold spreading through his chest. "Sarah, what are you saying?" She smiled, and her teeth were wrong. Too sharp, too many, rows of them like a shark. "I'm saying that I was infected 6 months ago, and I've been very, very patient, waiting for the right person to pass it to." Her face rippled. The skin split down the middle, peeling back to reveal something underneath. Dark fur, yellow eyes, a snout full of teeth. But parts of Sarah remained, her human features overlapping with the animal ones, creating something that hurt to look at directly. "The real Sarah Chen is still in here," the thing said with Sarah's mouth. "She's screaming, actually. Has been for months, but she's getting quieter every day. Soon she'll be gone completely, and then I'll just be me. But I need help, need more of us, need to spread, and you..." Those terrible teeth gleamed. "You're perfect, young, inexperienced, already isolated out here. By the time anyone realizes something's wrong, you'll have infected half a dozen others." Ramirez backed against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin was small, maybe 12 by 12 feet. One door, 2 windows, no escape. Sarah's body continued to transform, clothes tearing as muscles reshaped themselves. She rose up to her full height, over 7 feet now, hunched arms too long and tipped with claws that looked like they'd been carved from bone. "Don't fight," she said, voice layering. Sarah's voice, something else's voice. Voices of people long dead but still present in the creature's memory. "It hurts less if you don't fight. And like Connor said, it feels good eventually. Natural. Right. You become something better than human. Something free." Ramirez's hand found his knife. Just a standard folder 4-inch blade, completely inadequate. But it was all he had. "The iron in the door," he said desperately. "You can't transform with iron nearby. You said so." "I said it interferes with transformation. Makes it painful. But David, I'm already transformed. The iron just means I can't change back." Sarah's clawed hand reached for him. "Now hold still. This will only hurt for a moment." Ramirez dove under her reach, rolling across the rough floor, coming up near the door. His fingers found the iron latch, and he yanked it open, spilling out into the fading afternoon light. Sarah shrieked, a sound that was part human scream, part animal howl, part something else entirely. She crashed through the doorway after him, but the iron had done something. Her transformation was reversing, fur receding, bones cracking back into human configuration. She fell to her knees, writhing, both human and animal, and neither. "You can't run forever," she gasped. "It's already in you. When I grabbed your shoulder..." Ramirez looked down at his shoulder. His uniform shirt was torn where Sarah had grabbed him, and underneath his skin was wrong. Not quite his skin color. Darker, coarser. And when he focused on it, he could feel something moving underneath. Something burrowing deeper, spreading through his bloodstream like ice. "Oh God, welcome to the family," Sarah said, her voice steadying as her body finished reverting to human form. She stood, naked and covered in blood, and smiling with teeth that were still too sharp. "You've got maybe 6 hours before the change becomes permanent. 6 hours to decide, fight it and die screaming, or accept it and become something more. Ramirez ran again, but this time he was running from himself as much as from her. The forest was different now. He could smell things he shouldn't be able to smell. Other hikers miles away, their sweat and fear and excitement. He could hear heartbeats, the rush of blood through veins, the tiny sounds of prey animals hiding in underbrush. And he was hungry. Not normal hungry, but starving. A hunger so deep and primal that it made his previous life of sandwiches and protein bars seem like an absurd joke. His vision was changing too, colors bleeding together while movements became sharper. He could track the path of individual insects through the air, could see heat signatures of warm-blooded creatures through solid wood. The world was becoming readable in ways his human brain wasn't equipped to process, information flooding in faster than thought. He found himself near Cade's Cove, the broad valley where Connor Burke had first seen the deer with human eyes. Sunset was painting the mountains gold and red, and below him a family was setting up camp. Mother, father, 2 kids, laughing and arguing about where to put the tent stakes. Normal people doing normal things, completely unaware that something wearing David Ramirez's skin was watching them from the tree line, calculating which one would be easiest to separate from the group, which one would scream the loudest, which one would taste best. No. Ramirez jerked back from those thoughts, horrified. They weren't his thoughts, couldn't be his thoughts. He was a park ranger. His job was to protect people, not hunt them like prey. The word felt right in ways that terrified him. His hands were changing now, fingers elongating, nails darkening into claws. He watched with detached horror as fur pushed through his skin, as bones restructured themselves with wet cracking sounds that should have been agony, but instead felt like relief, like shrugging off a coat that had always been too tight. He had 6 hours, Sarah had said. 6 hours to decide. But what if he didn't want to decide? What if he just let nature, or whatever this was, take its course? The family below had finished setting up their tent. The kids were playing tag, running in circles, so much energy, so much life. The father was starting a fire, the smell of lighter fluid sharp even from this distance. The mother was on her phone, probably checking the weather, making plans for tomorrow's hike. Tomorrow. Would Ramirez even be himself by tomorrow? His radio crackled one last time. Connor Burke's voice, or what remained of it. David, if you can still hear me, if you're still in there, you need to know something. I found a way to fight it, not to cure it. There's no cure, but to stop the spread. You have to... Static. Before you lose control. Before you infect others. It's the only way. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The transmission ended with a sound like bones breaking. Ramirez looked at his hands, half human, half something else. Looked at the family below. Looked at the darkening forest that was starting to feel more like home than any house ever had. 6 hours to decide between dying human or living as a monster. But there was a third option, wasn't there? The option Burke had found. The option that ended the infection before it could spread. Ramirez's fingers found his knife again. The blade caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing golden reflections across his transforming skin. Below, the family's laughter echoed through the valley, innocent and pure and completely unaware of how close death was standing. He thought about his mother in El Paso, his kid sister who'd just started college, his friends who'd thrown him a party when he got the ranger job. He thought about all the hikers he'd helped over the past 4 months, all the lost tourists he'd guided back to safety, all the campfires he'd doused and bears he'd hazed away from food storage. He'd taken this job to protect people, to preserve wilderness, to serve something bigger than himself. One last act of service, then. Ramirez looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He wondered if Connor Burke had seen the same stars before making the same choice, wondered how many others had stood where he stood, feeling the change creep through their bodies, weighing the cost of their humanity against the seduction of transformation. The hunger was getting worse. His vision was almost entirely animal now, the world divided into prey and predators and nothing in between. The father below was weak, soft from office work. Easy target. The mother would run. The kids would scream. It would be simple, natural, right? No. David Ramirez, 4 months and 6 days as a park ranger, 23 years old, raised Catholic though he hadn't been to Mass in years, took the knife in his trembling, fur-covered hand and pressed the blade against his throat. The last thing he thought before the blade bit deep was, "I'm sorry, Mom." The last thing he heard was laughter from the forest. Sarah's laughter, or Connor's, or his own, or something far older that had been laughing at human choices for centuries. The last thing he felt was relief that the hunger would finally stop. They found David Ramirez's body 3 days later, about 50 yards from the family's campsite. The family reported hearing an animal in distress that night but hadn't investigated. Smart decision, the investigating rangers agreed. Lots of dangerous wildlife in the Smokies. The official report listed Ramirez as a victim of a black bear attack, though several details didn't quite fit. The wounds were wrong, too clean, too deliberate. And there were no bear tracks, just human footprints that seemed to change mid-stride into something else, something with too many toes and joints that bent backward. The Park Service buried the inconsistencies along with the body. They hired a new ranger to replace Ramirez. Young woman from Colorado, bright-eyed and enthusiastic, ready for her first real assignment. She lasted 2 months before she stopped showing up for shifts. Her apartment was empty except for a pile of clothes folded neatly on the bed, and a note written in handwriting that didn't match her application forms. "Gone to join the family. Don't look for me." Because some hungers can't be stopped, only spread. Some infections have no cure, only carriers. And some families grow one member at a time, patient and persistent, wearing faces that used to be human but aren't, haven't been, will never truly be again. In the deep hollows of the Great Smoky Mountains where tourists snap photos and children play, and families make memories, things move between the trees that park rangers have learned not to investigate too closely. The missing person statistics are acceptable, the disappearances explicable, the odd details easily dismissed. And every few months, when someone new joins the Park Service, young, inexperienced, isolated, those things in the forest watch and wait and smile with teeth that remember what it was like to be human. The hunger never stops. The family always grows. And David Ramirez, who chose to die rather than feed, became a story that skinwalkers tell each other as a joke. The one who thought death was an escape. The one who didn't understand that some hungers transcend even death, that some infections burrow so deep they reshape the soul itself. Because here's the secret they don't tell you. Ramirez didn't die. The blade stopped his transformation, prevented him from becoming fully skinwalker. But it didn't kill the infection, it just paused it. Trapped him in the in-between state. Neither human nor animal nor spirit. Unable to move on. Unable to transform. Unable to do anything but watch. His consciousness still inhabits that spot in the forest. Bound to the place where he died, aware of every hiker that passes, every family that camps nearby, every vulnerable person that wanders too close. He tries to warn them, tries to scream, tries to do anything to prevent what happened to him from happening to others. But all that comes out is wind through the trees, and the skinwalkers laugh because they know the cruelest truth of all. There is no escape. Not in life, not in death, not in anything between. Once the infection touches you, once the change begins, you belong to them forever. David Ramirez belongs to them forever. And someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100 years, when the conditions are just right and someone vulnerable enough wanders past his trapped spirit, the infection will spark to life again. We'll find a new host. We'll continue spreading. Because that's what skinwalkers do. They persist, they adapt, they infect, and they never ever stop hunting. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. David Ramirez found the teeth first. Human molars, 47 of them, arranged in a perfect spiral on the frozen ground of Trail 14. He'd been a ranger in Superior National Forest for 11 years, 3 of those spent trying to forget, and he'd never seen anything like this. The spiral was precise, mathematical, each tooth pointing inward toward an empty center where the snow had melted away despite the 18-degree temperature. Steam rose from the bare earth, carrying a smell that reminded David of rendering plants and fever dreams. He radioed it in at 847 hours, his breath clouding in front of the Motorola's mesh speaker. Dispatch, Karen Lightfoot, who'd worked the desk since before David's time, took longer than usual to respond. When she did, her voice had an edge he'd only heard once before, 3 years ago, when they'd found what was left of Marcus. David pushed that thought down where it belonged, locked behind the same door that held all the other things from that winter. But the teeth kept pulling his attention back. He counted them again, still 47. The steam had stopped rising, but the ground remained bare. Dark soil against snow that should have been pristine this deep in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. The missing person report for Ashley Nguyen had come through 48 hours ago. 28 years old, experienced hiker, last known position somewhere along the Echo Trail corridor. Her Subaru was still parked at the trailhead, keys in the ignition, phone on the dashboard showing 43 missed calls from a contact labeled Mom. The phone's last GPS ping had placed her approximately 3 miles northeast, which meant she should have been nowhere near Trail 14. But then, neither should the other 3. David pulled out the case file he'd started keeping in his truck, the one he hadn't officially reported yet because he didn't want to sound like he was losing it again. Melissa Thornton disappeared 6 weeks ago during the new moon. Robert Chen, 4 weeks ago, also new moon. Thomas Whitmore, 2 weeks ago, same lunar phase. Now Ashley Nguyen, all experienced outdoors people. All vanished without logical explanation, all leaving behind evidence that made no sense. The teeth spiral was new, though. The others had left different signs. Melissa's campsite had been found with all her gear perfectly arranged in concentric circles, food unopened, fire never lit. Robert's backpack had been discovered hanging 30 feet up in a pine tree, contents meticulously organized by weight. Thomas's boots had been located filled with fresh blood that DNA testing couldn't identify beyond mammalian, possibly human, inconclusive due to degradation. David photographed the teeth from multiple angles, the camera's digital shutter clicking obscenely loud in the winter silence. The forest had that quality today, the one that made him think of held breath and watching eyes. No birds, no wind through the pines, just the creak of his insulated jacket and the sound of his own breathing, too fast, too shallow. He made himself slow down, count to 4 on the inhale, 6 on the exhale, like the department therapist had taught him. Doctor Morrison had cleared him for active duty 6 months ago, said he'd processed the trauma adequately, that survivor's guilt was normal and manageable. Dr. Morrison hadn't been there when they'd found Marcus torn open like a biology textbook diagram, hadn't seen what had been done to him, hadn't heard the sounds Marcus had apparently made before the end, based on what they could reconstruct from the frozen blood splatter patterns. The teeth gleamed in his flashlight beam, unnaturally white, too white. David bent closer, saw they'd been cleaned, scrubbed, possibly boiled. The roots were intact, removed carefully, surgically. He thought about the force required to extract a molar and felt his stomach lurch. His GPS unit showed his coordinates, 479483 to N, 91.3217 to W. Deep in the Boundary Waters, far enough from any established camp that Ashley Nguyen shouldn't have been here unless she'd gotten catastrophically lost. But the teeth suggested planning, purpose, ritual. You didn't accidentally arrange 47 molars in a perfect spiral. David's radio crackled. Ramirez, you still at the site? Affirmative. Collecting evidence. Winters is asking if you need backup. David thought about Jake Winters, 24 years old, 2 months in the service, still thought the job was about nature photography and helping lost tourists. Negative. I'll process the scene and return to base by 1400. Copy that. Be advised, we've got weather moving in. Fronts coming down from Canada, they're saying wind chill could hit -40 by tonight. Understood. He clicked off and stood, knees protesting. 42 years old and already feeling it in his joints, the cold settling into places that used to be resilient. The spiral of teeth stared up at him like an eye, pupilless and patient. David had grown up in Albuquerque, transferred to Minnesota because he'd wanted forests, real wilderness, the kind of solitude you couldn't find in the Southwest. His ex-wife, Jennifer, had left him because of that solitude, said he loved the trees more than her, and maybe she'd been right. After Marcus, he'd loved them even more, because trees didn't die screaming your name. He bagged each tooth individually, labeled them, photographed the spiral before disturbing it. Proper procedure, proper documentation, all the things that had failed to save Marcus but might save someone else. The empty center of the spiral bothered him most. He knelt, touched the bare earth with one gloved finger, still warm. He pulled out a soil thermometer, took a reading. 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Impossible. The air temperature was 18. The ground should be frozen solid. He collected a soil sample, sealed it, labeled it. Behind him, a branch cracked. David spun, hand dropping to the bear spray on his belt. The forest remained empty, dense pine and bare birch extending in every direction. But he could feel it now, the sensation he'd learned to trust during his years in the service. Being watched, being assessed, being found wanting. "Ashley Nguyen?" he called out. "If you can hear me, I'm Park Ranger David Ramirez. I'm here to help you get home safe." His voice died in the trees, swallowed by winter silence. No response, no movement. Just that sense of scrutiny, cold and patient and hungry. David finished processing the scene by 11:30 hours. He marked the coordinates with a flag, took a final panoramic photo sequence, and started the hike back to his truck. The trail was well maintained, familiar, a path he'd walked hundreds of times. But today it felt different. The distances seemed wrong. Trees he'd passed heading in appeared in wrong positions on the way out. He checked his compass 3 times. North was north, the needle steady and sure. Yet the forest had rearranged itself somehow, subtly, like furniture moved 3 inches while you weren't looking. He reached his truck at 12:47 hours, 13 minutes longer than the hike should have taken. His Garmin GPS showed the correct route, no deviations, but his trail counter said he'd walked 4.7 miles instead of the 3.2 he'd logged heading in. He stared at the numbers, felt something cold that wasn't the weather settle into his chest. The drive back to the ranger station took 40 minutes through forest that seemed to press closer to the road than it should. David kept the radio off, didn't want to hear Karen's voice, didn't want to explain what he'd found until he'd had time to think about it. 47 teeth, a perfect spiral. Impossibly warm earth in the middle of a Minnesota winter. The station was a low timber building that tried to look rustic for the tourists but was really just practical. Good insulation, backup generator, satellite internet. Jake Winters was at his desk, bent over paperwork, looking young and optimistic and doomed. David had been that once, before he'd learned what the forest could do to people when it wanted to. "How'd it go?" Jake asked, looking up. "Found evidence. Teeth." "Like animal teeth?" "Human." David set his evidence bags on his desk, started the documentation process. 47 molars arranged in a geometric pattern, no sign of the missing person. Jake's face did something complicated. "Jesus, you think it's connected to the others?" "What others?" "The other disappearances. Everyone's talking about it. 4 people in 6 weeks, all on new moons. There's a thread on Reddit, people saying it's a serial killer, or a cult, or..." He stopped, looking embarrassed. "Anyway, yeah, you think it's connected." David filled out the evidence log with careful handwriting, each letter precise. "I don't speculate. I document and report." "Right, sure." Jake hesitated. "It's just, my girlfriend showed me these posts from people who used to live up here, indigenous folks mostly, and they're saying, 'Don't.'" David's voice came out harder than he intended. "Don't bring folklore into this. These are people's lives. Real people with families waiting for answers." Jake nodded, chastened, and returned to his paperwork. David felt bad about shutting him down, but not bad enough to apologize. He'd heard the stories too. Every ranger in the Superior National Forest had. The old Ojibwe legends about things that walked the winter woods. Things that were hungry in ways that had nothing to do with food. Wendigo, they called it, though the pronunciation varied by tribe, and the details shifted with each telling. A spirit of cannibalism and endless craving, born when a person ate human flesh during desperate times, or sometimes just born, malevolent and patient, waiting for the right kind of hunger to take root in human hearts. Marcus had mentioned it once, joking around a campfire during a training exercise. They'd been partners then, best friends, the kind of close that comes from trusting someone with your life in the wilderness. Marcus had done the research, read the academic papers, talked about psychosis and cultural context and how the legends emerged from very real fears about starvation and isolation during brutal winters. The next week, something had gutted him like a deer and arranged his intestines in patterns that looked almost like writing. David's hands shook as he logged the final evidence notation. He closed the file, locked it in the secure cabinet, and told Jake he was calling it a day. The drive home took him past the spot where they'd found Marcus, a stretch of Trail 9 that looked like every other stretch of forest, but carried a weight that made David's chest tight every time. He didn't slow down. He'd learned that lesson. His cabin was 8 miles from the station, isolated by preference and necessity. After Jennifer left, he'd moved farther into the woods, bought a place with solar panels and a well and good sight lines in every direction. Neighbors were a theoretical concept. The nearest house was 3 miles away, occupied seasonally by a retired couple from Duluth who hadn't been back since last summer. He parked, grabbed his pack, and stopped halfway to the door. Something was wrong with the porch. It took him a moment to identify what. The firewood he'd stacked that morning had been rearranged, not scattered or knocked over. Rearranged. The logs were now in a different configuration, sorted by size, arranged in a pattern that looked almost intentional. David drew his service weapon, a Glock 22 he'd carried for 8 years, and never fired outside the range. The cabin door was still locked, windows intact. No footprints in the snow except his own from this morning. He checked the perimeter, found nothing, cleared the interior room by room. Everything exactly as he'd left it, but the firewood stayed rearranged on the porch, and when he went back outside to look at it, really look at it, he saw the pattern was the same as the tooth spiral. Concentric circles around an empty center. 47 logs, counted twice to be sure. He brought them all inside, locked the door, checked that it was locked, then checked again. His hands were shaking worse now, and he recognized the onset of a panic attack. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, that sense of the walls getting closer. He made himself sit down, made himself breathe. 4, count in, 6 count out, like Dr. Morrison taught him. The therapist had been clear about triggers. Isolation could be one. Stress was definitely one. Anything that reminded him of Marcus's death absolutely was one. But this wasn't a trigger. This was something happening, something real. Something that wanted him to know it could reach his home, could touch his things, could come as close as it wanted while he was away. David heated a can of soup for dinner, didn't taste it, threw most of it away. He cleaned his service weapon, checked his ammunition, told himself he was being paranoid, and took out his bear spray anyway, set it next to the bed. The cabin had good locks, solid construction, windows that showed the forest in every direction. He'd always found that comforting. Tonight it felt like living in a fishbowl. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of teeth and spirals, and Marcus's voice calling his name from somewhere deep in the woods. At 0300 hours, David woke to the sound of something scratching at his bedroom window. He grabbed his flashlight, aimed it at the glass. Nothing there. Just darkness and his own reflection, hollow-eyed and afraid. But on the sill outside, arranged in the snow, were more teeth. He counted them through the glass. 47. A perfect spiral. Steam rising from the center. He didn't sleep after that. He sat in his living room with the Glock on his lap and the bear spray next to him and all the lights on, watching the windows waiting for dawn. The forest pressed close, patient and hungry, And David remembered something Marcus had told him during that last campfire talk. "The thing about the Wendigo," Marcus had said, staring into the flames, "is that it doesn't just hunt you. It makes you like itself. It finds your hunger, whatever you crave, whatever you're missing, and it amplifies it until you're hollow with need, until you do anything to fill that emptiness. And that's when it has you. What do you crave?" David had asked him, laughing because they were friends and it was safe to ask. Marcus had looked at him with an expression David didn't understand then, but understood now, looking back through the lens of loss. "To matter," Marcus had said. "To be remembered. To leave something behind that proves I was here." 3 days later, Marcus had gotten his wish. They'd remember him forever, just not the way he'd wanted. Dawn came slowly, the winter sun weak and reluctant. David made coffee with shaking hands, watched the forest through his windows, and tried to decide if he was losing his mind, or if something in the woods had decided to drive him that way. Either option seemed equally probable. Either option terrified him. At 07:30 hours, his phone rang. Karen from dispatch, voice tight and professional. "Ramirez, we need you at the station now." "What happened?" "Another one. Hiker called it in 20 minutes ago. Said he found a campsite, but..." She paused. "Just get here, okay?" David, dressed in layers, checked his gear twice, holstered his service weapon, and told himself it was just procedure. The drive to the station felt longer than it should, the forest seeming to swallow distance and time. When he arrived, Jake Winters was already loading his pack, face pale. "What's the situation?" David asked. Chief Winters, Jake's uncle, not coincidentally, emerged from his office. Robert Winters was 63, had been with the Park Service for 40 years and had seen everything there was to see. Except he hadn't seen this. David could tell by the way the man's hands trembled slightly as he held the incident report. Hiker named Tom Brennan was doing an overnight on the East Bearskin Trail. Says he found a camp about 2 miles north of Echo Lake. Tent, sleeping bag, the works, everything arranged in circles. Chief Winters met David's eyes. He says there was a tooth spiral too. Said he counted 53 teeth this time. This time? He'd heard about yours. It's on social media now, apparently. Someone leaked photos from your report. David felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. Who leaked it? Doesn't matter right now. What matters is we've got another active scene and a missing person, and I need my best ranger on it. He handed David the coordinates. Brennan's waiting there, says he's too scared to leave the site. Says he can feel something watching him. David looked at the coordinates, felt recognition settle into his bones. The site was less than a mile from where they'd found Marcus 3 years ago. Less than a mile from the place David had sworn he'd never return to. "I'll take Jake," David heard himself say. 2-person team, standard protocol. Chief Winters nodded. "Keep your radios on. Weather's getting worse, fronts moving faster than predicted. You've got till 1600 hours before it becomes unsafe to be out there. Find what you can find and get back." They loaded into David's truck, drove north on Highway 61, then turned onto the Echo Trail. The road was maintained but empty, snow-packed and treacherous. Jake was quiet, staring out the window at the endless forest. "You okay?" David asked. "My girlfriend's Ojibwe," Jake said. "Her grandmother lives on the reservation. She's been having dreams." David didn't want to hear this, but Jake kept talking. Dreams about something walking through the trees, something that's been asleep for a long time and just woke up. She says it's because we've forgotten the old ways, forgotten how to respect the forest, forgotten that some things should stay hungry rather than being fed. "Jake, she says the Wendigo isn't just a monster. It's a lesson. It shows us what happens when we take more than we need, when we consume without thinking, when we turn our hunger into identity." Jake looked at David. "She says it's been patient, waiting for the right time, the right people. People who are already hollow inside." "Stop the truck," David said. Jake blinked. "What?" "Stop the goddamn truck." David pulled over, breathing hard. I can't have you spooked before we even get to the site. I can't have you seeing things that aren't there because some old woman is having bad dreams. I need you focused, rational, and professional. Can you do that?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, sorry. This is my first really serious incident." "I know." David put the truck back in gear, pulled onto the road. "That's why you need to listen to me and follow procedure exactly. No speculation, no folklore, just observation and documentation. We find evidence, we document it, we get out. Understood?" "Understood." They reached the trailhead at 09:15 hours. Tom Brennan was waiting in a newer Jeep Cherokee, visible through the windshield, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. He was mid-50s, graying beard, expensive outdoor gear that had been used hard. When he saw them, he climbed out fast, stubbed out the cigarette. "Thank God. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I didn't want to leave. Thought someone might need me to show you where it is, but I also didn't want to stay there alone, you know? That place feels wrong." "We'll need you to guide us to the site," David said. "Then you can return to your vehicle while we process the scene." "Gladly. Jesus, I've been hiking these woods for 20 years, never felt anything like that before." The hike was 45 minutes. Tom setting a pace that was just shy of running. He kept looking over his shoulder, kept touching his chest like he was checking for his heartbeat. David recognized the signs of acute stress, the way fear could get into your cells and make itself at home. The campsite appeared exactly where Tom's GPS had indicated. A tent, green and relatively new, pitched in a small clearing surrounded by white pine. The sleeping bag was laid out perfectly flat inside, zipped up, undisturbed. The cooking gear was arranged in concentric circles around a fire ring that had never been used. David could tell by the untouched snow inside it. And in the center of the clearing, taking up a space about 6 feet in diameter, was the spiral. 53 teeth this time. All molars. All cleaned and bleached white. All pointing inward toward that same impossible bare earth. Steam rising slowly into the frigid air. "Mother of God," Jake whispered. Tom was backing away. "I'm going back to my car. I've got your radio frequency. Call me when you're done, I'll give my statement at the station." "Mr. Brennan?" But Tom was already moving, fast. Not quite running, but close. David watched him disappear into the trees, then turned to Jake. "Start documentation. Photos, measurements, everything. I want to search the perimeter." "Alone?" "You'll be able to see me. Just stay focused on the job." David moved into the trees, scanning for any sign of Ashley Nguyen or whoever had made this camp. The forest was silent in that specific way that meant something was wrong. No birds, no small mammals, no wind. Just the creak of frozen wood and the sound of his own breathing. He found the first marker 50 yards from the campsite. A birch tree, white bark stripped away in a pattern that looked almost like writing. He photographed it, tried to make sense of the symbols. They reminded him of something he'd seen before, something Marcus had shown him from his research on indigenous languages. The second marker was another 50 yards out, a stone cairn that definitely hadn't been there before, rocks stacked in impossible balance. The third was a deer carcass, frozen solid, organs removed and arranged on the snow in that same spiral pattern. David's stomach turned over. The removal had been surgical, precise, done with knowledge of anatomy. "David!" Jake's voice, sharp with fear. David ran back to the campsite, found Jake standing rigid, pointing at the tent. The zipper was opening, by itself. Slowly, precisely, the metal teeth separating one by one. David drew his service weapon, moved closer. The tent flap fell open. Inside was a person. For a moment, David's brain insisted it was Ashley Nguyen, female, Asian, the right age. But something was profoundly wrong with the proportions. Too tall, limbs too long, bent at angles that shouldn't be possible inside a tent that size. The head turned toward them, and David saw the eyes. They were Ashley's eyes. He'd seen them in the missing person photo, but they were wrong now. Empty. Starving. Ancient. "Ashley Nguyen?" David's voice came out steady despite the fear screaming through him. I'm Park Ranger David Ramirez. We're here to help." The thing that was wearing Ashley Nguyen smiled. It had too many teeth. Not just the normal 32, but more, dozens more, filling its mouth in concentric rows. When it spoke, its voice was layered, multiple tones at once, like an entire chorus of people speaking in unison. "David, we've been waiting for you. We've been so hungry." Jake fired his bear spray, the orange stream hitting the tent. The thing inside laughed, a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. It emerged from the tent, unfolding in ways that violated physics and biology, and David saw what it truly was. Something that had once been human, transformed into hunger incarnate. The skin was white, stretched too tight over a frame that was too large. The hands ended in claws, black and sharp, and the mouth, when it opened fully, showed a throat that descended into darkness deeper than any human body could contain. "Run," David said to Jake. "Run now." They ran. The forest erupted behind them, trees splintering, snow exploding upward. David didn't look back, couldn't afford to, just focused on the trail ahead and the sound of Jake's panicked breathing beside him. Something howled, a sound that started low and climbed into registers that hurt to hear. David's radio crackled. "Ramirez, come in. We're reading seismic activity near your location. What's happening?" He couldn't answer, needed all his air for running. The trail twisted, familiar landmarks appearing in wrong order, wrong positions. The forest was changing around them, leading them deeper instead of out. David checked his GPS, saw the coordinates shifting impossibly, north becoming south, becoming east. Jake screamed. David turned, saw the thing that had been Ashley Nguyen standing 15 feet away, between them and the trail. It wasn't chasing them, it was herding them, driving them towards something specific. "David Ramirez," it said with Ashley's voice, with Marcus's voice, with the voices of everyone who'd ever been lost in these woods. "We know your hunger. We've tasted it. You crave meaning, purpose, redemption for failing your partner. You want your suffering to matter." "Stay back," David aimed his service weapon, hands shaking. "I'll shoot." "Bullets can't kill hunger. Nothing can. Hunger is eternal. Hunger is patient. Hunger is the only truth." The thing moved closer, each step leaving footprints that smoked and steamed. "But hunger can be shared. Hunger can be understood. Feed with us, David. Feed on the forest, on the lost, on everything you've ever wanted but couldn't have. Become what you truly are." David fired. 3 shots, center mass, perfect grouping. The bullets passed through the thing like it was smoke, buried themselves in a pine tree 20 yards beyond. The Wendigo smiled its thousand-tooth smile. "You can't hurt us. We're not a thing, David. We're a hunger. We're your hunger. We've always been inside you, waiting." It gestured to the trees. Look at what you really crave." David looked. Saw Marcus standing between the pines, whole and healthy and smiling. "Hey partner," Marcus said. "Took you long enough. I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for 3 years." "You're not real," David whispered. "I'm real as you want me to be. I'm real as your grief, as your guilt, as your hunger to go back and save me." Marcus moved closer. "You can save me now, David. You can save everyone. All you have to do is feed. Just once, just enough to become what you were meant to be." Jake was sobbing, collapsed in the snow, staring at something David couldn't see. The Wendigo shifted, showed different faces, the 3 other missing hikers, other people David didn't recognize, victims going back years or decades or centuries, all of them hollow-eyed and hungry. "The forest provides," the Wendigo said. "The forest remembers. The forest needs those who understand true hunger. Join us, David. Fill the emptiness inside you. Become complete." David thought about it. For one terrible moment, standing in the snow with his useless gun and his sobbing partner and the ghost of Marcus smiling at him, David thought about it. Thought about surrender, about transformation, about becoming something that would never feel loss or guilt or fear again. something that would just be hunger, pure and simple and free from the weight of being human. Then he thought about Jennifer, his ex-wife who'd left him but sent him a card every Christmas anyway. He thought about Karen at dispatch, who remembered his coffee order and asked about his day. He thought about Chief Winters, who'd given him a second chance after Marcus died. He thought about Jake, young and scared and counting on him to get them both out alive. He thought about being human, broken and flawed and still capable of choosing what to feed. "No," David said. "I choose to stay hungry." The forest screamed. Trees splintered, snow rose in walls around them. And for a moment David saw the truth behind the illusion. The Wendigo wasn't one thing but many, a colony of hunger that had grown over centuries, feeding on the desperate and lost. It was ancient and patient and almost incomprehensibly vast, its body made of trees and frozen earth and the bones of everyone who'd ever surrendered to their own emptiness. But it wasn't invincible. It needed permission. It needed people to choose transformation, to actively embrace their hunger. Without that choice, without that surrender, it could frighten and confuse and pursue, but it couldn't fully consume. David grabbed Jake, hauled him to his feet. "Run. Don't look back. Don't listen. Just run." They ran through a forest that was trying to become a mouth, trying to swallow them whole. David's GPS was useless, spinning through coordinates that couldn't exist. His compass needle rotated slowly, pointing at nothing. But he'd been a ranger for 11 years. He knew these woods in his bones, knew them deeper than GPS or compass could measure. He followed the slope of the land, the angle of tree growth, the way water would flow if these streams weren't frozen. He followed his knowledge and his training and his desperate need to get Jake home alive. The forest fought them. Trees fell across their path, snow became quicksand. The temperature dropped so fast David felt ice forming in his lungs. Behind them, the Wendigo howled in voices that were Ashley Nguyen and Melissa Thornton and Robert Chen and Thomas Whitmore, and everyone who'd chosen hunger over humanity. But ahead through the trees, David saw something the Wendigo couldn't touch. Highway 61, gray asphalt and yellow lines, civilization and structure, and the choice to remain finite. They burst from the tree line, collapsed on the roadside, and the forest stopped at the edge like it had hit an invisible wall. A car screeched to a halt. An elderly couple, the man jumping out. "Jesus Christ, what happened? You boys need a hospital?" David managed to nod, managed to protect Jake as they were loaded into the back seat, managed to stay conscious as they drove south toward Grand Marais and safety and everything the Wendigo could never reach. In the rearview mirror, he watched the forest recede, watched the trees that had tried to consume them return to just being trees. But he knew the truth now. The Wendigo was patient. The Wendigo was permanent. And the hunger never really went away. It just waited for moments of weakness, for times when emptiness felt easier than the burden of staying human. The hospital kept them overnight, treated them for exposure and shock and symptoms the doctors couldn't quite categorize. Chief Winters came, took their statements, and didn't call them crazy even though he should have. Tom Brennan had disappeared. They found his Jeep at the trailhead, found him 2 days later walking south on Highway 61, 30 miles from where he'd started, unable to explain where he'd been or what he'd seen. The doctors diagnosed a fugue state. David didn't correct them. Ashley Nguyen was never found. Neither were the others. The search was officially suspended after 2 weeks, unofficially abandoned the moment Jake and David gave their statements. Chief Winters quietly redistributed assignments to keep rangers away from that section of forest. The tooth spirals were documented, photographed, sealed in evidence, and never explained. David requested a transfer in March. The Park Service sent him to New Mexico, to Carlsbad Caverns, where the only teeth were on tourists and the only thing that hungered was the darkness underground. And even that was manageable, predictable, safe. He tried to leave the Superior National Forest behind, tried to forget the winter in the woods and the thing that had worn Ashley Nguyen's face. But sometimes, usually around the new moon, David would feel it. A hollowness in his chest, a hunger that food couldn't satisfy. He'd look in the mirror and see his eyes just for a moment, reflecting something older than human. And he'd know that he hadn't escaped the Wendigo so much as learned to live with it, learned to keep his own hunger small and controlled and dormant. Because the thing Marcus had understood, the thing the Wendigo had shown him, was that the creature wasn't separate from humanity. It was what humanity became when people stopped choosing to be human. It was the endpoint of every emptiness, every craving that grew too large, every moment of wanting so intense it consumed everything else. The Wendigo hadn't died in those woods. It was still there, patient and permanent, waiting for the next person to choose hunger over humanity, waiting for someone to say yes instead of no, waiting with the patience of something that had outlasted civilizations and would outlast anything humans could build to keep it contained. And sometimes late at night in his new apartment in New Mexico, David would hear it calling. Not with sound, but with that specific emptiness that came from knowing you'd lost something irreplaceable. Marcus's voice, Jennifer's laugh, the feeling of purpose he'd had before everything went wrong. The Wendigo offered to fill that emptiness, offered to make him complete. David chose to stay hungry. Every day he chose it. Some days the choice was easy. Some days it took everything he had. But he chose it, and that would have to be enough. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened.